Minnesota as well. He has been dedicated to research and teaching for more than 33 years.
40.
For 40, closer to 40. This gives us an idea. And I'm proud to say that he was the director of the Faculty of Philosophy and Letters while I was there as well. And we welcome you. We're very, very happy to have you here. And hopefully you will come more than once.
I will be more than happy.
This will be our inaugural lecture dedicated to the commemoration of the 500 years after Cortés arrived in what is nowadays Mexico.
Well,
welcome and
thank you very much, Dr. Elena González Treviño. It's a pleasure to be here at the center that you direct. And thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And I think that this commemoration, not celebration, is very important because the conquest of Mexico is one of the most relevant and revolutionary historical happening in all the human history. It changed this conquest changed absolutely the world, the whole world. So what I will do is briefly an introduction to the process of the conquest, and I will focus on the debates, controversies concerning the just or unjust character of the conquest and of the political imperium that was imposed by Spain in what now is Mexico. So, because it's a long time that I studied my PhD in Minnesota, my English is not very fluent, and my pronunciation has never been quite good, but I think that you can understand. If not, please let me know.
maybe we
That's a bigger
change
chair.
the, yeah.
No.
That chair is bigger.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, this is comfortable, but I cannot reach. So I will be presenting these ideas based on this PowerPoint. I'm not used to PowerPoint. Usually philosophers do not use PowerPoint, but in this case, it will be helpful for me. I hope that it will be also for you. Well, last February 18, 500 years ago, Cortés departed from Cuba towards the Gulf of Mexico, and with this fact started the conquest of Mexico. It took about, well, of course, before that, there was a kind of discovery, between inverted commas. Actually, it was not a discovery. Colon never knew that he has discovered America. He thought that he was in some islands days from Calcutta, India. Mm-hmm. But he never knew that it was a new continent. It was later on, and it was a kind of literary happening, because a book of Amerigo Vespuccio that wrote called The New World. Mm-hmm. And this started to have a big effect in the public, and that is the reason because some historians call about the invention of America, mm-hmm. not the discovery of America. This is this idea produced a very strong controversies between very dear professors of our faculty, Miguel León Portilla and Edmundo O'Gorman. Well, so this is a map that expresses the Cortés idea where he have arrived. He thought it was near, it was a part of Asia, near Calcutta, but never knew that it was a new continent. This was made by his brother. He also thought that it was just an island near Asia. Okay, the discovery between inverted commas, was imposed by the Catholic kings, Isabel and Fernando. And they have a very clear project to expand Spain all over the world. They started with the south of Spain, with Andalusia, and then they went to the Canarias, and it was a very clear project to expand to Asia, the domains of Spain. And just a year after, of the supposed discovery in 1492, 1 year after, they asked the Pope, Alexander VI, to give a bulla, to give permission to have dominion on that land. So these bullas, called Alexandrian bullas, was the first title, the main title of justification of the conquest and of the domain. And this was a very controversial document. Sorry. Because the first question that raised these bullas was that if the popes had or not authority to give these lands to the kings of Spain. Some philosophers, some lawyers thought that the Pope had political power and not only spiritual power, and some people thought that the Pope does not have political power. Among others, the King of England, of course. He had very strong doubts, not because of religious or theological matters, but for very practical and political issues, really. Well, we will talk a little bit later about Henry VIII. Well, these are some of the main controversies that raised the conquest of America. In 1512, after a very dramatic talk given by a friar in what now is República Dominicana, then was the Española Island, la Isla de Española. Anton de Montesinos, who was a friar, gave a famous talk saying that Spaniards were not there for killing, for exploiting the Indians, but for help them. And actually, they was not helping at all. Spaniards was not helping at all. This strong talk caused a very strong reaction of Spaniards there, and in La Isla de Española, and this caused that the King Fernando, by that time in 1512, Queen Isabel has already died, and remained as a king of Spain, Fernando el Católico, called to a meeting of philosophers, of lawyers, called Juntas de Valladolid. And this was the first academic discussion of the legitimacy of the just or unjust character of the conquest. But it remains this controversy. Among the people that were in La Española on that famous talk, sermon, is it okay to say sermon? Okay, on that sermon of Anton de Montesinos, Bartolomé de las Casas was there. And he was deeply touched by the speech of Anton de Montesinos. A couple of years later, he renounced to his lands and called encomiendas. The encomienda was the main way of exploiting Indians and taking their lands. It was called encomienda because the Spaniards, who was encomendados, who was asked to help the Indians, to educate the Indians, to Christianize the Indians. Actually, they didn't do anything of that. In pay of his service, they took Indians and Indians' work. That was the encomienda. And it was the main way of exploiting Indians in America. It was not slavery, but encomiendas, which actually was a kind of slavery. Sorry. Well, we will. Don't worry. No problem. Yes, you have some water. Thank you. I am with the cold of these days. My voice changed a little bit. Well, in 1536, in the University of Salamanca, this is very important. At the University of Salamanca, there was a group of philosophers and theologians and people dedicated to theology. Thank you for coming.
Sorry, I was on the other side of the building.
Well, I will go quickly by these controversies. In 1539, Francisco de Vitoria, who was one of the most important philosophers of that time, not only in Spain but in the whole Europe, wrote a work called The Indies, on the Indians. And he elaborated a very well articulated criticism to the. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. A very well founded, elaborated criticism on the legitimacy, on the just or unjust character of the conquest. Of course, his conclusion was that there was no reason at all to justify that conquest and that imperium, that power of Spain on Indians. And this is the first one of the these works are called relections because there were lessons that were given again. It was a very traditional costume that the professors of the medieval time and the Renaissance have to give a public talk about one issue of the course that he was teaching. And that special talk was called relection. I mean, a lesson given again, but not to the students, but to the public. And that's the reason because these works are called relectio or relections. Then in 1939, well, the first one was Domingo de Soto. In 1939 was Francisco de Vitoria. And this kind of academic reflection, that's very important, a very important issue, really caused a preoccupation in the Emperor Carlos V, Charles V. And he really thought, or at least he really doubted if he was doing right or wrong with that dominion, with that power in America. And Bartolomé de las Casas, but that time was in Spain. He was already residing to his lands and to the Indians that he originally exploited. And he became a very strong protector of the Indians, and he talked strongly with the emperor and convinced him to stop encomiendas. That was a very important achievement. In 1942, the Charles V established the new laws, las leyes nuevas, that stopped completely new encomiendas. What that caused was a rebellion in Peru that ended with the assassination of the virrey. So it was clear that the people who have conquered Peru and Mexico was not happy with these laws. They opposed it, and finally those laws were derogated. Well, perhaps the most famous controversies on the conquest and on the imperium was the so-called Controversias de Valladolid. There are several films about that. If you look at in the computer, you will find 2 or 3 films for the Controversies of Valladolid, which by that time is very important. There is also one theater play, the Controversies of Valladolid. I don't know if you see that play at the university.
I may have heard something.
Yeah. Well, this controversy was between the most brilliant intellectual for the empire, who was in Sepulveda, and he was a very interesting argument. He said that Spain had the obligation to stop human sacrifices, because these sacrifices violated human rights. So it has a strong argument. And on the other side, it was Bartolomé de las Casas. And Elena told me that some months ago, a professor of the faculty, Dolores Bravo, came and talked about the LOA, el auto sacramental del Divino Narciso. Is that right? Well,
Yeah, but several poems by Sor Juana.
okay. Well, the argument of Bartolomé de las Casas, it was still better and more clever. He said that if Indians were barbarians for sacrificing human, Christians are much more barbarians for sacrificing God. And if Indians were barbarians for eating the herd of the most virtuous men and women, well, Christians are more barbarians because we eat God himself. And we cannot doubt that if the bread that represents the body of Christ is just a symbol, that would be something unacceptable for the churches. The real cloth and the real body of Christ. So it was not a good argument for justifying the war, saying that since they made human sacrifices and need human blood, they were barbarians. Well, Christians are worse. It was a very interesting discussion. Finally, we get at the main issue of our talk, which is this controversy that was presented by Alonso de la Veracruz in 1553, 1554. This was the course, the first course taught in the University of Mexico when it was inaugurated, and not only that, because Alonso de la Veracruz was a founder professor of the School of Arts and Theology, which is the first institution considered as a founding moment, not only of the university, but also of our school, of the Facultad de Filosofía y Letras. And that, for that reason, unfortunately, I didn't took a picture of the. I didn't took a picture of Alonso de la Veracruz. This is Alonso de la Veracruz. See.
Vasco de Quiroga.
This, see, yes. Okay, this is the Tabasco. I'm skipping.
That's
I would
Fray
be,
Alonso.
this is Fray Alonso de la Veracruz. This is Bartolomé de las Casas, defender of the Indians. This is a very dramatic picture, which is in the Museo, en el UNAM, Museo Nacional de Arte. No, it's a picture of the 19th century, very impressive. And let me tell you something. When the Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional, EZLN, perhaps you have heard about that, when they started the revolution in 1994, a very famous magazine, Vuelta, has as a
Cover?
As a cover, exactly this image. But on the other side was the obispo of Chiapas at that time, Samuel Ruiz. It was very interesting that in this size was Bartolomé de las Casas. Several centuries after, it was something very similar with Samuel Ruiz. Well, this is Alonso de la Veracruz. Let me tell you something. Here there are two mitras. How do you say that kind of hat of the bishops? Mitras we call. Mitras is the same word. Okay. He was offered by the Emperor Charles V in 3 times different appointments as a bishop, and he rejected all of them. He was of the idea that the power, even inside the church, it was not good for Christianity. And so he never accepted to be a bishop. Bartolomé de las Casas, yes, he accepted to be a bishop, but not Alonso de la Veracruz. What this means is that Alonso de la Veracruz was a most radical philosopher, much radical than Bartolomé de las Casas. Unfortunately, less known than Bartolomé de las Casas. Well, so this was the first course that he taught at the foundational moment of the University of Mexico. And let me confront this man, this philosopher, this friar, with another very popular friar who was exactly the one which is here. This one, or this one. This was also a bishop, Vasco de Quiroga, called Tata Vasco, is very famous because he founded, he thought that effectively that really the Indians were barbarians, but they were good barbarians. And so if they were civilized, they will become a very clever and a rational people. So he founded what he called pueblos hospitales. The interesting thing is that pueblos hospitales are inspired in Thomas Moro's Utopia. I don't know if you know this very important work of Thomas Moro, which is very interesting because Thomas Moro created this literary work based on the notice of the discovery of America. And he thought that he was an island. Of course, it's a utopia. It's not an historical work. It's a fictional work. And what was more interesting is that the kind of social political organization that he proposed by utopia was taken as a model for Vasco or Vasco de Quiroga. So this is a very interesting example of how history influenced literature, fictional literature, but also how fictional literature are taken as a model for real persons to change the world. But there are a big difference between Vasco de Quiroga and this other. This is a pueblo hospital that still exists nowadays in Pátzcuaro, Michoacán. This is the statue of the same persons of Tata Vasco, which is almost a saint. But it was a process. There was a process to appoint him saint, canonization. I don't know if it is correct the word. Canonize somebody to make it saint. But some historians give a very important reasons why this shouldn't happen. Actually, he was a very strong enemy of Alonso de la Veracruz. He always has a paternalistic, a protective attitude before Indians. They were barbarians and they have to be civilized for Spaniards. But Alonso de la Veracruz thought that in a very different way. Alonso de la Veracruz, as well as Victoria, this is Francisco de Vitoria, teacher of Alonso de la Veracruz in Salamanca. But Alonso de la Veracruz thought in a very different way. He thought that Indians were as regional as Spaniards or European, but in a particular way. So he thought that there are different ways of being regional. There are different ways of being civilized. There are different ways of organizing a just state. And the fact that Spain, Europe on one hand, and America and Mexican Indians were different, it doesn't mean that they were barbarians or they were their states were tyrannies. No, they were as just as Spaniards, but in different ways. So this is a very radical kind of thinking. Some people will call a relativistic point of view. And actually, it is a relativistic point of view. But I would say, what is wrong with relativistic? The opposite is ethnocentricity. So if we have two extremes between ethnocentricity and relativity, well, each one can choose what he thinks is better. Alonso de la Veracruz has no doubts about that. But he has a very important argument. This idea was mainly exposed in this relation. This is the Dominion Infidelium de Justo Vero. It is the relectio given in the course 1553-1554, the first course in the University of Mexico, founded in 1553 exactly. This man, you can see the color of this man, is an Indian. This is the son of the last king of Tarascos, Calzoncin, who was killed by the Inquisition for practicing human sacrifices. But he was a student of Alonso de la Veracruz, and Alonso de la Veracruz learned to speak the Indian language, Tarasco, from this person. So this is a very interesting picture that clearly expresses the equal relationship between Spaniards and Indians. Both have to learn from the other. the exchange, the different is not to be considered as irrational, not to be condemned, but on the contrary, it is an opportunity of learning, of expanding the own culture. And that's the reason because we put this this picture in the front of in the cover of the book of Fray Alonso de la Veracruz. This was translated from Latin to Spain by a very good friend and very dear professor, and Professor Heredia. Here I can see Roberto Heredia. He says, I don't know. I can. Well, let me go to the main argument. How much time do I have?
About 10 minutes.
Okay, just let me skip to the main argument of this. This is a brief description of the book. The book is constituted by 11 doubts or questions. He follows the dialectic method. By the way, this book that you have here is the first book written and published, the first book of European philosophy, written and published in America, in all America. It's called Dialectica Resolutio. It's a beautiful Baroque cover. And here is the year 1954. Sorry, 1554. Sorry, 1554. This was a bestseller. It was republished 7 or 10 times in Spain, maybe. But this is logic. I don't discuss logic topics because it would take us more time. But it's interesting. This is the first book of philosophy written and published in America. I said it is composed by 11 doubts and questions. For example, was it lawful for the Spanish to collect taxes from the Indians? These questions immediately refers to it would be lawful if the Spanish, if the emperor, would have just dominion, just authority over the Indians. Well, immediately the question is, does the emperor has fair authority, just authority on the Indians? And the dialectic methods gives arguments for and against. And the resolution, the dialectical resolution, that's the way in which this book is called, the resolution of this argument, of this confrontation of reasons, is the conclusion. And in every question, all the conclusions of the exposed by Alonso de la Veracruz are in favor of Indians and against the Spaniards. For example, if the natives were true masters and could thereby be deposed, he says, no, they were true masters and they couldn't be deposed justly. Why they were good masters if they were not Christians? Well, he said, faith does not give, not take away power, because power, political power, is human right, human law, and faith is divine or holy hope. And God does not have anything to do with political power. So he is against a mainstream ideology of that time. And he is a very radical Republican. Let me see.
When was the translation? You said his first translation was into English. When was it?
Yes, that's interesting. It was made in 1968.
Oh, right, okay.
Because let me tell you something. This book disappeared. First was forbidden his publication. It never was published until then. And then it disappeared until 19th century. And it was found by a Jesuit Jesuita, ¿cómo se dice?
Jesuit.
Jesuit, Father Burrus from the United States. And that's the reason because the first translation from late Latin was to English, not to Spanish. Where he find this, no problem. Where he find this book, he never told us. Tell us when it was found. Well, we have to say something with proud. The first complete translation in Mexico was made by the Facultad de Filosofía y Letras. I have to remember, in 2004. And the second one, it was made by the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas, completely. Both translations by this very good friend, Heredia, Professor Heredia. Let me, this is a quotation of the main Republican thesis of Alonso de la Veracruz. It is therefore necessary that if someone has just dominion over somebody, it must come from the will of the actual community, which transfer its dominion. So originally the power belongs to the community, not to every man. No, this is something liberal, something modern. It was something strong, more radical, to the community, which transfers its dominion to a group of others, such as in the case of aristocratic principality or democracy, or to do a single person as it's the monarchy principality. Neither the Pope nor the Emperor were authorized to rule by Indians. So were not authorized by the Indians to rule them. And therefore, they do not have legitimate power. On the contrary, Indian governors do receive power from the people and therefore have just domination on them. So this is a very radical thought in favor of Indians and against the Pope, against the mullahs of Alexander VI, against the Emperor. Well, we are about to finish. Here is an Indian philosopher, a Mayan philosopher, well, actually, it's not a Mayan, it's a Nahuatl called Tlamatinime, a Mexican philosopher. And this is another conclusion about the rationality of Indian people. The inhabitants of the New World not only are not children or mindless, but in their own way, they are prominent and at least some of them are particularly evident. This is obvious because before the Spanish arrived, and even at present, they have a system with magistrates, governors, and some of them most appropriate legislation. They are then not so childish or mindless to not to be able to govern themselves. They are as rational as Spaniards. And this is the most important idea that justify this kind of relativistic, but not radical relativistic, but constrained relativism that justify these judgments of Alonso de la Veracruz, that people may differ very much about what they consider rational, what they consider beauty, what they consider good or bad, between certain limits. But there is not only one way of being just, or being rational. Thinking of that way is a great injustice. Thinking that the way in which I think is the only rational way is a basic and unacceptable injustice, epistemical, political, ethical, social injustice. And he was against that. He was a pluralist. There are many ways of being rational, not any way, but many ways of being rational. There are many ways of being just. And how does he justify this? This is the central idea. This is a quotation of him. natural law. I mean, he believes and he sustains that there are natural law, but the natural law is universal. Let's see what he says. Natural law, with regard to those things that are second principles, that are deduced as conclusions from the first principles, is variable, and it is not the same in all nations. It is not the same in all nations. This can be seen through experience. So experience must test our theories. It's not Newton. It's 200 years before Newton. This is Alonso de la Veracruz. This can be seen through experience. See, we can see that something that is considered in some nations to be good, to be a good thing, under the natural light of the first principles, in other nations, it is not considered as such. Maybe, I continue with the quotation, maybe whatever seems tyrannical from the point of view of a nation should be appropriate for the point of view of these barbarians. Well, the key is on the distinction between first and second principles. The first principles of natural law are so general that you cannot apply to facts, to a particular situation. They need to be interpreted by second principles of natural law. And if the first principles effectively are universal, does not change through history, the second principles change continually. Example, every government must look for or must realize the common good. If it does not realize, does not achieve the common good, it's tyrannical. Okay, what is the common good? Well, it change. What is a good for Nahuas, call Aztecas? I don't like to call Aztecas, but it's the most popular way to refer to them. Or for Maya people, it cannot be for the Spaniards. And the Spaniards has not the right to impose the second principles to Indians, nor the Indians to impose the second. Plurality amongst certain margins, not absolute relativism, but plurality. And this is a very radical way of thinking, 16th century. Actually, I don't know a most radical multiculturalist thinker than Alonso de la Veracruz. Well, I think that we can stop here, and if you have some questions, what I wanted to present to you mainly was very profound and well founded criticism to the Spaniards' conquest and the Spaniards' imperium in Spaniards' empire in America, and that something. Yes, I want this. There is another one that recently. Well, here is the idea of faith that comes from divine right does not give or remove the power to rule, which is part of human rights. Therefore, faith does not give nor takes away just domination. So it doesn't matter that Indians were not Christians. They have this is not a reason for. But I will skip what I wanted to do now. It must be somewhere. Where is the part in which Alonso de la Veracruz? Well, here it is, but I don't know if you can read it. About 2 weeks ago, the president of Mexico asked the king of Spain to offer apologies, or how do you say this? Yes. Apologies, to offer apologies to Indians. Of course, the president of Mexico had also to ask to give apologies to Indians himself, but but also the King of Spain and also the Pope, because they in some ways are responsible for the institutions that they represent. And the King of Spain says, "Oh, this is anachronic. This, if it would happen in that time, it would be okay. Not 500 years." Well, look what Alonso de la Veracruz says about it. The emperor must not only give apologies, must repair all damages caused to Indians and restitute to them. You can see. I can see. Could you please read it?
The emperor must repair all damages caused to Indians and restitute to them all goods that Spaniards have stolen from them. In the same obligation are all captains and soldiers, and they cannot be absolved until they effectively return to Indians everything that has been stolen.
Wow. More clear is not possible. More clear is not possible. This is a very radical philosopher, and very honest, and I think it's unfortunately is not as well known as others. Is much more radical than Bartolomé de las Casas, for example. Bartolomé de las Casas thought that the Pope and the Emperor has right to as a just domination. Also, he says that not the conquerors, not the soldiers, not the comenderos, but the Emperor was okay, and the Pope also. No. And also, nobody has just right. So it's and I think that this way of thinking, it's important, it's relevant for our days. Here is Sor Juana, and let me say this. I am absolutely sure that he read Alonso de Veracruz, because in this work, Loa Laudo Sacramental, El Divino Narciso, look what he says. This is America. This is the character America, who is an Indian woman, and says, Bárbaro, I'm sorry. It's my translation, so I don't know if it's correct. Barbarian, mad, blind man, with no understand reasons, you seek to interrupt my appeasement, that in serene and peaceful tranquility we enjoy. Stop your attempt. So it's a madness trying to impose by force and religion. The barbarians are those people that are trying to impose the Christian religions. Not to talk and not to convince, that's another way. But by the force, this is absolutely unacceptable. And this idea that Alonso de la Veracruz clearly exposed, 200 years later, is beautifully presented by Sor Juana. The same idea. And not only her, I will finish with this picture, which are our professors, who have a very similar way of thinking that Alonso de la Veracruz. I call this a renaissance of Renaissance. The 16th century was the time of Renaissance, and there was a Spaniard and Ibero-American Renaissance, no doubt. And now this way of thinking is again alive. And this is Miguel León Portilla, who wrote a very, he edited a very important book called The Visions of the Defeated, Visions of the Defeated. And he confronted the vision of Indians against the visions of Spaniards. But the very interesting thing is that philosophers like Alonso de la Veracruz adopted the point of view of Indians. They adopted it, and this is the same that in our days have done Miguel León Portilla, Luis Villoro, Pablo González Casanova, all of them. Rodolfo Staffenhagen, Carlos Montemayor, and a very close friend of mine, recently dead, Leonard. So this way of thinking is nowadays alive in Mexico. and the claims of Alonso de la Cruz are valid today because the Indians are in the same situation or worse than they were on the Spaniard dominion. Okay, thank you very much.
What was the insurrection in 1994?
Oh, okay, that's very important. In 1994,
And you
India-
have, you have a picture about that.
oh yes, thank you. Where is it?
Más cerca al final.
There's- Oh, okay, this one. Okay, thank you very much. Well, like was the anti-colonial revolution when he was alive in the Indian movement. This is Comandante Ramona, Comandante Ramona, no subcomandante, yes. She is, how to say subcomandante? Commander?
Yeah.
Is it right? Commander Ramona. Commander of the, let me translate it, let me say first in Spanish, Ejército Nacional, Ejército Zapatista de Liberación Nacional. National Zapatist pero Liberación
Army for National Liberation.
Okay, thank you for national liberation. Indians from Chiapas, Mayan Indians mainly, started a revolution against the state. They took us, militarily, they took a city, they declared they were to the Mexican state to get freedom from the state of Mexico. And this revolution it was more symbolic, more intellectual. It was also a military revolution. There were many deaths. But suddenly, in a question of weeks, it transformed in a kind of not only intellectual, but a cultural, political movement that, from my point of view, is the most important political movement that we have had in a century. From the Mexican Revolution today, this is the most important. It changed many institutions, among them electoral law. There was translation, there was change of government thanks to the change of electoral law that was promoted after this revolution in 1994. This army is still fighting, not with arms, not violently, but politically. Actually, one of these women participated in the last elections. They intended to have an Indian candidate to the president, but the political system of Mexico makes it possible to have this. But it's very interesting, this attempt. No?
Looks like she was only 47 when she died. Was she killed?
No, she was not killed. This lady died effectively for cancer, for a cancer.
Yeah.
For a cancer. But it was the main leader, woman leader. There are others which are more famous, of course. The most famous is Subcomandante Marcos. I don't know if you have heard about Subcomandante Marcos. It appears in many photographies. But this is the Comandante Ramona. All Zapatists use this kind of, we call pasamontañas. How do you call it? Balaclava. In order to avoid to be identified by the police or by the... Well, but the fact that this movement exists reveals that the unjust relationship between the state, now it's a Mexican state, it's not a Spanish state, it's still causing many injustice to Indians. Actually, this person was a great poet, Carlos Montemayor. Carlos Montemayor.
Could you go back to that last one again?
Sí,
There
sorry.
was an English name on author.
Excuse me. Oh, yes, sorry.
There was
Sí,
a book
that's
there with
important.
an English author.
No me digas porque ya me hice bolas con esto. Yes, I presented 2 books of very important British historians.
Oh, right. Okay.
I recommend highly these books. The first one is David Braiding. I have it in
Oh,
Spanish.
David Brady. Yeah.
Yes. This is a book, this thick, an excellent book called The Indian World. No? In Spanish, translated as Indian, Orbe Indian. This is from Cambridge. And John Eliot, which is very famous, he has studied a lot the history of America and of the conquest. I highly recommend these 2, among others. I was very glad, I was pleased. Yesterday I visited, I spent my wife and me spent all the day in the British Museum. And I was very impressed by the fact that there is a room of only for Mexico. That's good, but there is not a word about the conquest in the whole museum. Oh, man says, okay. And I think that this fact, Adam Smith said that the most important historical fact was the discovery and conquest of America. And I think that he is right. But 500 years from that historical happening, we should be more interested and be more deseoso, ¿cómo podemos decir?
Desiring
More-
to discuss.
Yes, to discuss and to think about the conquest because there is another important fact. The conquest of America is the beginning of modernity. It's the first historical fact that give rise to modernity. And it's another reason because we have to be more interested in that commemoration of the 500 years of the conquest.
What did Veracruz think about the bishop who ordered the Mexican books to be destroyed?
No, I mean, he was very critical of that. Because the only way to, for example, the only way to evangelize, to convert Indians should be the word, just the word. Indians are intelligent, Spaniards are intelligent, they can talk, they can understand, and they can find the truth. And any other way, any coercion for the faith is absolutely not only unjust, it's stupid.
Yeah.
Because he says, let me say, if I can, solo se puede creer queriendo. We can only have faith if we want to have faith.
Yeah.
Wanting is necessary for faith. If you don't want it, you are not going to have it.
I'm amazed that in the age of absolute monarchs
Absolutely.
that he wasn't executed or
Oh yes, of course. Well, not was executed. He was sent to the Inquisition. I mean, there was a religious, political, judicial institution called Inquisition, and when somebody was condemned, was attacked as a hereje, not orthodoxus, heterodoxus, he was sent to the Inquisition, and that person could be hanged or could be quemado, tortured or even fired.
Yeah.
But Alonso de la Cruz was sent to the Inquisition, but he was a very clever and very respectable man. He came to the emperor by that time in 1562, that's right, in Spain. He has to return, he has to abandon the cathedral at the university and to respond to the charge of
Heresy.
see, of course.
Heresy?
Exactly, of heresy.
Mhm.
And he came to Spain, he defended his cause, he was absolutely absolved. Well, that's interesting. Spanish people, Spanish kings, which were very Catholic, they were touched by that kind of discourse. Levi-Strauss, this very famous anthropologist, says that the only conquest that has been so discussed, it was the conquest of America. No other conquest was discussed. For example, Machiavelli, in The Prince, he dedicates 3 or 4 chapters to what he called mixed principles, principados mixtos. And they are mainly states, colonies. They are main colonies that are acquired by conquest. And he, in any times, exposed any moral or ethical reflection. It was just a way of expanding power. And that was common in all Europe. But these people were, the school is called the Salamanca School, the School of Salamanca, because it started in the University of Salamanca, which is founded in the 13th century, and it as the University of Oxford. That's very important. Let me tell you something. Much of these radical republicans ideas come from Scotland. Yes. William Baskerville is not William Baskerville, is William Ockham.
Okay.
Do you remember? Do you remember the name of the rose?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
So actually, the main character of the Winter Rose is William Ockham. But since Echo doesn't like William Ockham, he put in William Baskerville in order to Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
But he was a very radical philosopher. He, for example, Alonso de la Cruz does not refer at all to the power, to the spiritual power of the Pope. Ockham, yes. All